I was nowhere to be found. I left with Destiny, finally free from his suffocating control and manipulation. Living with my sister Nora was supposed to be temporary, just until I got back on my feet and figured out my next move. But from day one, Nora kept making these little comments about how maybe I should consider Gary's perspective and think about taking some responsibility for what happened. It was like Gary had somehow brainwashed everyone with his nice guy act. Nora would make these passive-aggressive remarks about how grief wasn't an excuse for burning bridges and how I needed to be more realistic about my situation. She acted like I was some dramatic teenager instead of a woman who had lost her child and her entire future. After a week of Nora's lectures, I realized I might have been too hasty in cutting ties with Gary, not because I was wrong about anything. I still believed every word I'd said was completely true, but because being right doesn't pay the bills or put a roof over your head. I swallowed my pride and called Gary, expecting him to be relieved to hear from me. Instead, he was cold and distant, like he was talking to some stranger who had called the wrong number. It was such a dramatic change from the man who used to hang on my every word and seemed grateful just to be with me. I tried to explain that Destiny had been filling my head with negative thoughts during a vulnerable time when I wasn't thinking clearly. I was willing to cut her off completely and even go to that therapy he'd been pushing if it meant we could work things out and get back to planning our future together. But Gary just kept saying he was done and that he tried everything to help me through my grief. He was acting like I was some charity case he'd grown tired of supporting instead of the woman he'd proposed to and gotten pregnant. The coldness in his voice was nothing like the caring man I thought I knew. When I mentioned needing some financial help since I was starting over with literally nothing, he actually had the nerve to say no. This, from the man who claimed to love me, who had proposed to me, who had gotten me pregnant and then failed to protect our baby. The least he could do was help me get back on my feet. I reminded him that I'd given up everything to move with him, my job, my apartment, my entire life, and that I'd lost our child because of his poor choices. But he was too selfish and self-centered to see beyond his own hurt feelings about me telling him the truth. I tried to explain that grief makes people say things they don't necessarily mean, that I'd been processing incredible trauma and needed him to understand that my anger came from a place of deep pain. Instead of showing compassion for what I'd been through, he was punishing me for having a completely natural human reaction to loss. When I pointed out that our mutual friends thought he should give me a second chance, he dismissed their opinions like he was the only person whose judgment mattered. It was clear he'd already made up his mind and was just looking for reasons